considering the narrow partisan interests or even narrow British economic interests. Our future is a question of life and death. And especially after the whole incident in Beijing now, when we saw the troops firing shots at pedestrians just because they criticized the government, but which is the thing we're used to in Hong Kong. We're used to handing petitions or signatures or staging hunger strike. You know, it is nothing extraordinary for the people of Hong Kong. But you know, we fear that if we do it in our future, we also be faced by tanks.
Can we move on to Mr. Chung, and perhaps you could explain Mr. Chung's situation, because I understand he's a refugee from an earlier upheaval in China.
Yes, Mr. Chung, he went through the first part of the Cultural Revolution, and I think life was so unbearable.
We should explain that he doesn't speak English.
Yes, and Mr. Zheng is a worker, and he's on the committee of the Christian Industrial Committee, and he only speaks Cantonese, so he might be able to tell more of the story about, you know, what
yes,
he's
I think the question that I'd really like to ask Mr. Chung is, are you frightened now about your situation?
Definitely, I'm afraid. 就喺而家中共嗰個從嚟嗰個政權就強調啊，槍桿子啊，促政權，佢揸住槍啊就促政權，佢而家到今時今日都係咁樣，所以我哋好擔心將來。
Mr. Zheng insists that the Chinese Communist Party upholds the principle of that the regime comes from the barrel of the gun. And he has never given up the arms.
Bishop, can I turn to you? You're the Bishop of Hong Kong and Macau. How do you feel about this point, which Sir Geoffrey is implicitly suggesting, that British people just couldn't cope with 3.5 million people coming into Britain? It's too many people at once.
I don't think this is a matter of number, but it's a matter of the moral responsibility, which the British always try to honor. And I think that in the history of Britain, they accommodate the people from Gibraltar and accommodate the people from Falkland Islands.
But there are far many more of you, aren't there?
Well, I think that 3 million and a quarter million most of them would not be going to England, and at least 1/3 of them would be settling in other countries, and most of them don't want to leave Hong Kong.
But what Sir Geoffrey says is that if you offer an insurance policy, you have to take the risk that everybody will take it up.
And of course, we have to take that point, but I think that Hong Kong is a good example, because in the last 40 years, Hong Kong has taken in a lot of refugees, and all those refugees have helped to build up Hong Kong. It's not destroying Hong Kong, but rather to try to build Hong Kong.
Perhaps I can ask your neighbour, Mr. McGregor, you're a member of LegCo, the Legislative Council here. Can you not accept the point that it is politically impossible, or at least very difficult, for Britain to accept quite so many people?
I don't believe so, because among other things, Britain is at the moment committed in 1992 to accepting, if they wish to go, 200 million Europeans with free movement throughout the market. What is 3.25 million against 200 million people? I think is a very small proportion. Secondly, I think that Britain and the British people, I have a feeling that Hong Kong is at the moment in the same situation as Britain was immediately after Dunkirk, where they were alone and looking for a friend, and America became the friend and helped Britain. I think Hong Kong is now in the situation where we are asking the mother country to extend us a lifeline, which I think is well within British capability.
Martin Lee, you're another member of the Legislative Council. Can I ask you, Sir Geoffrey did seem to give at least a glimmer of hope there that democracy would be speeded up in Hong Kong. Now, you're somebody who's campaigned very hard for that in the past. Doesn't that give you some satisfaction, at least?
Well, giving us democracy now and not passports to get away in case it doesn't work, and bearing in mind that People's Liberation Army will be stationed in Hong Kong, and bearing in mind what they did to the people of China who want democracy, is giving us death.
So it's too late now just to have democracy. The principal question for you is the right of entry.
I think Sir Geoffrey should realize that if passports are given to us, then there is an obligation on the part of Great Britain to make a future work. In other words, to make sure that we have a future so that we do not cash in on those policies. But now, He doesn't give passports. He therefore doesn't even try to give us a future.
Peter Wong, can I ask you, you're a prominent businessman here, and you must understand the economic realities of this. It seems that there would be very considerable racial tensions, in Geoffrey Howe's view, if this right of entry was granted.
Well, personally, I don't think so. Because in the business community, I think that one of the things which we have contributed to the Sino-British Agreement is trying to maintain the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong through our business activities. And this is really across all the races. But I think the current event really shatters the beliefs which we had built in the past 10 years. Now, without this right of abroad, I think it certainly would make the Hong Kong situation, immigration situation, deteriorate. And from the business sector, I think it would be very difficult for us to maintain our men in our companies, and hence pretty difficult for us to contribute in the transition state to maintain the business activities.
But can you understand these very strong feelings over a large number of years about the subject of immigration in Britain? Is there anything that you can say to the British people to persuade them away from their current view?
Well, I believe in the past few days, especially when this atrocity in China prevails, there's strong sentiment in the British public, as we hear from Hong Kong, suggested that the previous policy has got to be reviewed.
Robert Tang, what's your view? You're from the Hong Kong Bar Association.
May I pose this question first? Is it right to hand over Hong Kong to China when it is no longer reasonable to believe that the Chinese government will keep their promise under the Joint Declaration, and without giving the people of Hong Kong a possibility of refuge? I believe when one is deciding what is right and wrong, one should not flinch from the consequence. Theoretically, several million Hong Kong people may resettle in Britain. However, the answer to the question should not depend on one's perception as to how likely or remote is that possibility. The Foreign Secretary said in the House of Commons on the 6th of June, in connection with the proposed visit by the Prince and Princess of Wales to China, that the visit, and I quote, clearly cannot take place so long as those responsible for the atrocities over the past weekend remain in control of the Chinese government. Just as the visit cannot take place, I believe Britain must not deliver Hong Kong to a government which is responsible for those atrocities without offering the people of Hong Kong a possibility of refuge.
Thank you very much indeed. Martin Lee, can I come back to you? Do you feel that there is basically some form of racism at the back of Britain's attitude?
I think it's implicit in Sir Geoffrey's answers earlier. He put it in very diplomatic language, of course, but to me it's one word, racialist. Can you imagine, and I'd like to put this question to Sir Geoffrey, handing over 5.5 million people to China who are deemed to be counter-revolutionary. It's like handing over 5.5 million Jews to Nazi Germany during the Second World War when they were born in the British territory.
David Walter. David, can we just pause?
We have a question from Jonathan, yes.
Could we just pause there, David, because we've heard a